I'm Jennifer Lanham on behalf of the Cotswolds National Landscapes, and my co-host is Sam Frith from Earthwatch.
Hi.
Today, we are delighted to welcome guest speaker Ash Smith, co-founder of Windrush Against Sewage Pollution, to explore the story of WASP, how grassroots action can lead to national change. As both an angler and scuba diver, Ash has witnessed the spiraling decline of England's rivers and waterways firsthand. His passion for the natural world, combined with his experience from a career as a police detective superintendent, has made him a formidable river activist. Ash's advocacy has led him to being a go-to source for information by the media. He has been interviewed by national TV news, supported documentaries, and even yesterday was in the Guardian newspaper holding the Environment Agency to account for refusing to provide details on environmental information requests. Journey with us as Ash uncovers how a small group of concerned individuals created WASP and became national influencers, unapologetically taking polluters to task for river action. Welcome, Ash.
Thank you very much. Do you want me to start now?
Off you go.
Okay, I'm going to share a screen and get a few slides going. Is that working?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. Okay, so thank you for coming along, and I'll see if I can just give you an outline of this, and maybe we can answer some questions in the Q&A. But let's start off with what WASP is, I guess. So we try to be pan-political. There's no point in trying to say you're not political. You've got to be political to get anything done. You can see that right now. It's all kicking off, and we've made it something of an election issue to end untreated sewage pollution, improve effluent standards. These are our aims, because some of those effluent standards are quite shocking, and to make our rivers safe for all. So we're not just saying people have got to be able to swim in this because we could just put chlorine in it. That's not the answer. We're looking at making it safe for every bit of life in our waters and bring it back to the kind of vibrant state that it used to be in. And we do it through investigation, communication, and education, engagement, and the use of the law. We're a registered charity now with a website. And before we start, we keep saying that when water company people are not the problem, they are part of the solution, and we mean that. We've got a very good relationship with lots of water company people, and it's not them, but it is definitely the water industry, which is a very horrible beast. And the Environment Agency, same thing. We know some good people in the Environment Agency, but what a shocking regulator that has turned out to be, and the same with WASP. So I'm going to talk about who is in WASP and what it actually is, what was happening when we first started back in the day, what were the inspirations and reasons for doing it, and our ambitions and objectives that have come along the way. How did we get from nowhere to somewhere, and what's going on right now, which is the most important thing, because we don't like to dwell too much on history. So WASP is, it's a kind of a hub for people, and we like people to come that are really motivated themselves, that work in their own field, but gather information and achieve something that we all share and we all work with. So it's more of a kind of an idea than a rigid organization. So we have donors to fund the thing. We've got trustees to run it. We've got river watchers, supporters, researchers, analysts, and investigators really at the core of it. And that can be a small team. It mostly is a small team that commit massive amounts of time to it. But we've got a much wider group as well around the outside in exploring areas from ecology through accounting, and more recently accounting and audit and economics, education and chemistry, graphic design, the whole thing. People come and go and have come and gone along the way to create WASP. But at the heart of it, mostly you often see me and you see Peter Hammond, Professor Hammond, as the exceptional data analysts, less so you see Jeff Toombs, who does a massive amount of work, and Vaughan Lewis, who does a huge amount of work around the planning issues. And now we've also got an accountant, a very experienced auditor, Stanley Root, and an economist, Stephen Jones, plus lots of other people unnamed who've gone along the way, and they're all volunteers. It started in about 2016 when I discovered from the Environment Agency that untreated sewage was being dumped in our in the Windrush. Someone's not on mute, so there's a kind of a noise. Can anyone?
Is that Vanessa? Please, could you
Sorry.
put yourself on mute? Thank
No worries,
you.
no worries. And apparently, you know, we moved to Windrush in 2013. This picture was taken in 2009. By the time I got here, it wasn't looking like this. But it's so recent history. That was taken by my neighbour Peter Hammond, and I then got hold of some video that told me that the river used to look like this in Whitney, crystal clear,
Wow.
full of fish. That's a big shoal of barbel there. It's an old video, so the image quality is not great. And this is the same place. That was in 2022. It's just like that now. And frankly, that's a massive environmental crime, isn't it? So that troubled me quite a lot. And I also, along the way, got some footage from a BBC wildlife photographer called Hugh Miles, who sent me this little excerpt of what he filmed underwater, just down below Whitney in 2006. And this is what was, they were feeding hemp seed through a tube. That was what was attracting these fish. You can just see the little bits of hemp seed going by from time to time. And I went there with the same guide that he used, who was John Everard. And what we got when we looked at that the second time around was just basically darkness and slime and really nothing. To think that that had gone in that short space of time was quite depressing. And what was even more troubling around about that time was that none of this was out in the media. These facts were in existence, and in fact, the World Wildlife Fund, at around about the same time that I started making some discoveries about the dumping of sewage, that people were looking at me as if I were to say, "You must be mad. That can't be happening. You'll get sued if you say that." And in fact, the water companies were very litigious at the time. The World Wildlife Fund did do a really good piece of work called Flushed Away, a great report that they made that did help me with some support that I wasn't completely barking mad. And that little table on the outside, on the left-hand side there, that was extracted from their publication, which showed how waters had declined, and no one had made a fuss about that. No one at all. The World Wildlife Fund later ditched that report pretty much, just stopped using it. And we never really understood why, but that's another story, I think. So this is interesting because when I was asked to do this, I thought, well, I don't remember what we did. So I scrolled right the way back down. It takes forever if you do this, by the way. Try and scroll the way back down your Facebook page. Eventually, all these things light up, and you go back to 2017 when we first started off. And I thought, well, having discovered using the Environmental Information Regulations, which is like freedom of information law, that Thames Water had dumped untreated sewage in the Windrush about 250 times in 3 years. I thought that was shocking. And in fact, that's not really shocking compared to what we know now to be true. And I started to get that round to neighbours, and I thought, yeah, people are interested in this. I thought the easiest way to do it was to make not to make a website, because that was a bit of work, but just to make a Facebook page. So I made a Facebook page, and these are the first posts that I put up, and it's quite interesting because it gives you your history, and that first post there that had two thumbs up. And this is the point, this is where you start from. You've got to accept this. If you start these kind of things, you starting from nowhere. And back in the day, no one knew this issue. It's not like now where everyone's heard of it. No one knew anything about this. It was real niche material. So we pursued that. And the Green Party were the first people to really help and support us. And they asked to put some flyers out for us, and we made these flyers. I remember that now. And that it's got 5 thumbs up. So things are improving. And it was around about that time then we also discovered that there were 2 ways to approach this. And I learned a lot of this from Vaughan Lewis, who showed me how they'd had a massive battle with the Environment Agency and DEFRA over the years, and had got nowhere with it through kind of rational argument, showing what was happening and just being brutally ignored. So we discovered really that the Environment Agency was controlling the truth. It's very 1984, really. They decide that the River Windrush is, in terms of weed growth, which is the graph you see in the middle, which is macrophyte life, which is plants in the river and on the river bank critically, had actually got slightly better since 2009 when it was really lovely. And when it's really horrible looking below, they say that was actually just around about then, that was actually better. So we thought, well, that's quite sinister. And they did it, we think, by counting the plants on the bank instead. So we thought, we're really up against it now. If we're going to start trying to challenge that, who's going to believe a bunch of campaigners in Oxfordshire when the Environment Agency is saying, no, there's nothing to worry about? And that's what we experienced in our first correspondence with the Secretary of State. There's nothing to see here. Thank you very much for your interest. Go away. So at that roundabout time, 2019, you had the chair of the Environment Agency pushing back on the first articles that we got out into the paper. We got something in the Times and the Financial Times, which the water industry pushed back on. She pushed back on this really hard, basically said, you don't know what you're talking about. Water quality is better than any time since the start of the Industrial Revolution. Water companies are not free to pollute, blah, blah, blah. Very, very aggressive response from her. Yet she was wrong. And this was from 2023, from DEFRA and from the cross-party audit committees, Environmental Audit Committee and the EFRA committee, that admits that underinvestment, insufficient government strategy, inadequate coordination has resulted in a failure to treat water with care, and that the failure of the regulator was out there, and we'd broken through that. So we did it by effectively changing the game that we're playing, and I suggest that's what everyone's got to do. If you get stuck in that kind of ditch where you've just got the authorities ignoring you, and that's what they're very good at. They will just ignore you. You have to change the game and use the media. And we did it through data analysis principally. I was very fortunate that my neighbour is a very talented data analyst, Professor Peter Hammond, Professor of Computational Biology, who had been using shape analysis and artificial intelligence to identify genetic conditions in children from the profile of their faces. He applied that to the profile of spill data, or rather flow data from water companies to identify massive numbers of illegal pollution events. And that's what changed the game. That's what changed campaigning from people complaining about stuff to us having, all of us having something tangible to hook onto, that they are breaking the law. And that they hate that. They really hate you talking about that, because every time we do, they'll start talking about wet wipes or using groups to talk about anything else apart from breaking the law, because they know that's where they're vulnerable. And we were quite pleased to actually get DEFRA to put W.A.S.P in a blog and try to respond to what we had revealed. So we know we're kind of starting to get very irritating and difficult to deal with for them. And it was something that we were engaged in. We then became quite a credible source of information, so much so that the Environmental Audit Committee, when it did its inquiry in 2021, chose W.A.S.P as the field trip to make. They came out to see us, and we presented to them at the Warwick Hall in Burford, and we took them down to the Windrush, about 50 meters from where I'm sitting now, and the MP stood on the bridge, and I showed them the state of the water and discussed that with them, and they used our evidence in their recommendations, which went to help form the Environment Act, which we knew would be inadequate, but not quite as inadequate, perhaps, as if we hadn't all contributed to it. So we did get a few things out of that act. And as we were building up, we were doing all of this stuff. And back in the day, we were unknown, and we were going to events. This was the this was Countryfile Live, actually, at Blenheim Palace, and all of these things were getting us engaged with local politicians, and we were getting interest from people that hadn't heard of this stuff before. And this was all really vital building stuff. Not so necessary net for people starting up now, because that this stuff is in, you know, it's in comedy now. So, you know, we know a lot of people know about it, and it's much easier. But that was the journey of engagement, that we still do these events. And we were getting money. We're getting bits of money, like from Waitrose gave us a couple of 500 quid, which have come in really handy, and various donors have helped us, including, in fact, Nicholas Field Johnson, one of the councillors, has given us 2 lots of £5,000 to buy sampling equipment with. So the county council has been generous, and various local donors have helped fund us. But we don't charge for any work. We do all of this for free, and we just need equipment and stuff to run events and so forth. We got on to Riverside Live, which was a live documentary. It's a really weird thing, with George Monbiot canoeing down the Wye trying to interview us. It was another thing. It was another step to getting this into the sort of public awareness that it is now, because we knew back in the day we have to make this a voting issue. When people were saying, why don't you do a petition, my response was, because no one knows what we're talking about. It has to be like plastic and bees. If you want people to respond to something, they've got to know it. And that's why we were relentlessly feeding out the scandals into the media. Panorama was a big step. That was a big, credible piece of work by Joe Crowley. We've done loads of TV, loads of, I don't know how many TV interviews, how many radio, and how many newspaper interviews. But let's face it, you get something in the Guardian, that's great. First of all, people have got to read the Guardian. Secondly, they've got to actually open the page with that on, or they've got to go to that page on the website. So your coverage is not what you think it is. So it has to go out in many, many ways to get it home. And the social media thing is, of course, incredibly valuable. And we'll do small events like the walk and talk things that we've done, and we'll do more of these at Whitney, where you get maybe 50 people walking along the Windrush together. You never know who's going to come to those events if you're thinking of doing this. And sometimes you will meet really, really useful people who will make a difference to your group. And of course, you've got now people actually going out on the street and being vocal about it. This was one of the events organised by, I think it was organised by local Labour at the time, and they was dropping a letter off at Thames Water. And these are all steps that make a difference. So I think we get to where we are, roughly where we are now, and what's important now. And I think, of course, the public awareness is still vitally important, but we have to start making a difference. And one of the best ways we can do this is through using planning law, because this is something that we've highlighted a bit. Sewage works are overloaded. This is how water companies make money. They don't spend any money, they just keep taking the connection fees. But we know now a way to break into this through using planning law. There's been a lot of work done by West Oxfordshire District Council with Lydia Arkiewski. Charlie Maynard has done a lot, massive amount on it, and Alaric Smith. And that is something that is making things shake up now, so much so that it's actually spilled over into the Environment Agency doing its job at Oxford, for example, and saying that they're objecting to housing because Thames Water is acting illegally. That is something we need to pursue. Housing is a powerful lever, and it will be with Labour as well, because that infrastructure is not kept up, and about 100 houses makes about 30 tons of sewage, at least sewage wastewater per day. So you can imagine how the impact of a few thousand houses goes into an already overflowing sewage works. And that's a big thing. And I think we would all do well to hook onto that. It's not a WASP exclusive, even though Catchment know about it as well. I spent money on the KC advice that we had to prop that up. That's a great thing to develop. But it's not about objecting to development. It's about making sure that things are done properly, basically. And the other thing we're working on, we've got one of our team who's he's 29 years as an auditor, accountant, working for one of the big four, very talented investigator of the money. And he's come up with some great analysis, which showed that Thames Water shareholders have never put in more money than they took out. The whole premise of privatisation was a complete scam, a complete lie, and we'd have been way better off to the tune of at least £72 billion if we hadn't done it. And we probably wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation if that hadn't been set up as a massive scam to rob the bill payer, and still is. So whichever party is in next, we're going to have to really force them into shaking this up and stopping that cash machine being available to basically parasites. Because that same investigator, Stanley Root, looked at that bill. This is the bill you get from Thames Water, and it says that they spend 3 pence of your pound on their managing their debt. But in fact, the truth is that it's 28%, which is ludicrous. And the fact that they can get away with lying on their bill while they're supposedly regulated is also a disgrace. So we'll be doing more of that. We'll be doing more from Professor Hammond. He's got some great stuff in the pipeline now that we've got the tap back open, due to some colleagues in the Northeast getting a decision from the first tier appeal against the Information Commissioner to get access to data that water companies were hiding with the kind of collusion of the Environment Agency. That tap is back open, and we're going to get some great stuff from him. And it was either today or yesterday. It was yesterday. Then I didn't see it yesterday. The article that was a piece of work that I gave to the Guardian last week about the Environment Agency refusing to tell us. And I've been in a scrap with the agency for years over getting information out of them, which we've dragged out. We've shown all sorts of conflicts and horror stories of poor corruption control. I use those words to not say that the Environment Agency is corrupt, but they wouldn't know if it was. And there are some very serious warning signs around it. This was about them now refusing to tell us if their directors, their regional and area directors, have got financial interests connected with regulated companies, because we know they have, and they won't give them to us. And we put that back to the chief executive of the Environment Agency to deal with that, rather than just let nature take its course, because that's such a disgrace. So where do we go from now? This is it's in where we wanted it to be. It is that political issue. It is a voting issue, and whatever happens, we can maybe give whoever it is a short period to get themselves sorted out, and then we're going to have to be campaigning back hard to make something happen. But I think the question was, do we need more groups like WASP? Well, WASP is just part of a big upwelling of public disgust. So that's how we see ourselves. It's just more of channeling information and feeding the truth out to the public. Do I intend to be doing this in 5 years' time? No, I really frankly don't. We shouldn't be doing this at all. And the fact that thousands of groups have grown up around the country at whatever cost is a disgrace. And you've got also groups that are well funded. That this is it's a kind of business opportunity. So you've got real conflicts of whether they want the problem to go away, or whether they want money to deal with the problem. So this is hopefully the time when other people will get inspired to deal with this, and the next generation, the younger generation, will come along and start fighting for what is right. And we can all be left alone and go back to our, this is where I'd like to be. And this fish, looking at a lovely piece of water ahead of me. And I think this is just to look at that and think that you know, this is what happens. That fish will be there in that kind of environment, and a big billowing cloud of pollution will come down. And will it be able to escape? You can just put yourself in that position outside as a big cloud, a black cloud approach you, and you cannot get away from it. And that is how we are treating our waters, which I find disgraceful, because this is the same piece of water. This is what has been done to that piece of water. A massive environmental crime for which nothing has been done. That's the same water down below the two sewage works, down below Carterton and Bampton. That destruction equates to 0 reports of anything. And the water company has got away with doing that. And it's replicated all around the country. So people ask me what you can do. I don't know. Why people are asking me? I mean, no, you could bother your politicians, and you have to do that, and you have to write to your politicians, and you have to do all of the things that we have to do, what we're doing. But the answer to this will come from somebody, and maybe it's someone who's listening now. Maybe it'd be someone that you might tell about this. This has to come from multiple sources. The solution to this lies in the hands of the people that are the victims of this. And you can't just wait to be told to do something. You've got to get off your backside and do it yourself. And that's the end of my story. Questions, please.
Thank you so much, Ash. Yeah, I mean, really, really motivating. I mean, I know I've only been part of this for a short time, but just to hear from you and how long you've been doing this is really motivating, and it really inspires people, and I'm really hoping that they do go out and they do what they can to make change. What we're going to do now is we're going to open up for about half an hour of questions and answers for Ash. If you'd like to ask a question, please can you raise your virtual hand? There should be a little button for it at the bottom of your screen somewhere. If you don't want to ask it in person, please feel free to type it in the comments box, and either myself or Jennifer can read it out as well. But I'm going to take this opportunity to ask Ash with the first question. I know you just said, you know, people are always asking you what to do, but are there your top 3 things that we could do to make positive change for the rivers?
Right. Okay. So first of all, we have to just not accept it when we know that the law is being broken, and so we have to get behind all of the uses of the law to break the current system. So our aim is to end privatization, because privatization is just designed as a ripoff, and it will always be so. It's always about extracting as much money as possible for private equity funds. So we have to break that down through showing how illegally that money is being made. If you look at the waste industry, terrestrial waste companies, they're doing the same thing. The directors are breaking permit conditions, not treating waste properly, whatever those descriptions of the offences are. They are exactly the same as the water companies. And those people are they're getting custodial sentences, and they're getting the Proceeds of Crime Act levied against them. And water companies are company bosses are getting bonuses. So, right. And that's become normalized, and it cannot be normalized. People have to rebel against that, and we have to complain, and we have to support people who are taking legal actions like that. We are talking to some lawyers at the moment about doing something, but you know, people have got to get behind that, and have got to be writing to their MPs and their councillors to say, you know, we're not accepting that. And there will come a time, I suspect, when people will really question whether they are going to pay water company bosses for this. Because I've resisted ever saying to anybody, don't pay your bill. There are groups out there where people are withholding their sewage component of their bill, and they've never been they've been challenged, but every time the debt collectors have walked away, and they've gone on for years. The only person that's got actually successfully challenged was somebody who was refusing to pay anything. They were refusing to pay their council tax and everything else, and their whole sewage bill. Well, you can't really do that because you're getting water delivered to you, but you're not getting. If you're living somewhere where your sewage is being treated by an illegally operating sewage works, I think you've got quite a strong case to say, why am I paying for this? And my view also now is Thames Water hike their bills, and yet they still say they're going to be paying dividends to shareholders who contribute nothing, by the way. I don't know if people can quite get their head around this. Those shareholders never contribute their own equity. All this stuff about we must have the shareholders, we need to bring in investment, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't happen. That's a lie. That's a trick. They just own the company and they'll sell the company. They don't deliver anything. This is the truth of many privatized issues, which is why the Royal Mail is such a shambles. The railways, everything. It was all about cash extraction from bill payers. So I think there will come a time when I might even say, well, I don't mind paying for the upgrades to the sewage works. I don't mind paying my bill, but I do object to paying dividends and the bonuses. So I'm not going to pay that component. That's occurring to me that I might do. I'm not suggesting anyone does that, but let's see how that goes. And the other one is to we've done a lot of lobbying of politicians. I've never been so frequently to the Houses of Parliament talking to people like Angela Rayner and Tim Farron and Steve Reed, and we've been pushing this message that you've got to get a grip of this because people have had enough of it. This is our water, and link that to what's happened with the Royal Academy of Engineering report, backed by Chris Whitty, Chief Medical Officer. They recognise the real risk of public health being damaged through sewage pollution, and they recognise that the next pandemic could be spread that way. That's what bottom line for that inquiry was. So those are the things to push, and to push your local councillors and say, build some houses, but don't build them and make things worse for everybody. Worse for the people that are going to buy those houses and worse for the people who already live here. That's not acceptable. It's against the law, and you are going to increase risk to public health. And people have to kind of maybe sometimes express that by joining some of the demonstrations or whatever. Get the numbers out there. Interesting how the media doesn't report on that actually, and you see places like Windermere. We have close links with Windermere and Matt Staniek and the Windermere group. They had a massive turnout on the weekend for their march to show their disgust at what's happening with United Utilities there, and doing any coverage, no coverage by the BBC, nothing at all. Which is why, and this is what happens with any big expressions of the same one with that big march in London, that big massive march of 80,000 people, whatever it was. Zero coverage for whatever reason. Don't show that to the public, which is why, of course, people like Just Stop Oil start cutting the Mona Lisa in half or something crazy that really divides opinion. And that's what we've always been very inclusive in this. And so we have to be smart about the way we express ourselves and keep support for it, because they recognize that dividing is the way to, this was the oil industry's secret. Divide your opponents and make them start to fight each other. That can't happen in this. We have to stay in this together. Sorry, rambling away now.
No, that's fine. Thank you. I'm going to go to Simon Browning next. He was the first to raise his hand. Simon.
Hi, thanks, Ash. So I'm working for the Rivers Trust. I used to work for West Country Rivers Trust, and I just wondered, there has been an explosion of kind of river groups, and what my current job is to help those people collect data, really. But I'm just thinking some of the things that you and particularly Peter Hammond did to start with, kind of unpicking the mystery around the data and the discharge consents, and now you're talking about the planning system and the finances of which is really important stuff to do. do you ever see producing do you ever see that being done locally by non-expert groups, providing guidance that people can do that themselves? Or do you see yourselves more as kind of blazing the trail, showing how important that is, blasting that open, and then let the politics, if you like, follow through to make all that more accessible? Because it's difficult to show people how to get into that stuff.
Yeah, it is, and we have done quite a lot of work to help people understand it and to do it themselves. Certainly the planning, we've put out a toolkit for people to do the planning stuff themselves and to give them some confidence in that. We recognise the value of all of that data collection of phosphate, nitrate, ammonia on the riverbank and the use of that data, but we're also really reluctant to get people to do stuff that isn't actually going to be regarded as anything by the decision makers. So if you're going to do it, we say have a plan to show something that will at least make a story in the media to show something is wrong, that the Environment Agency is lying to you, a common enough thing, that the water companies are breaking the law, or they're doing damage where they say they're not, and those are good. And I think also people have said, well, why don't you all get together? Well, because if you try and get all the environment groups together, you will never ever get them to agree to sign even one letter, because someone won't like the typeface, or they won't like the color of the paint. So the power of this is in it being more of an idea that people can fight back, they can do things locally, they can find some inspiring little thing that works in their area that doesn't work anywhere else, and don't restrict them, just encourage them and help them to do that thing, and you're chipping away at it constantly. And there's a great example here from in Clanfield, which is down the road in Oxfordshire. Tiny little sewage works. A fantastic piece of work was done there by Phil Barnett, who created Clanfield Residents Against Pollution, which is CRAP. The acronym was CRAP, and he did remarkable work, as he was an engineer and he knew how to unpick what the kind of nonsense that was being fed to him by the water company. And that place is still in disarray. It's being tankered now directly to Whitney, and I think there are that if that damage could be sort of reenacted by groups all around the regions of the water companies, you would really start to rattle them and get to. One of our aims was to make all these sewage works, these small sewage works, get shut down and tanker and pipe them to a decent, competent, well-operating sewage works where everything is done properly. And I still think that's a good mission for us all to get into, because this is just crumbling infrastructure, making money for water companies, and that's how they like it. If we can make it not make money for them, like Clanfield is just a proper thorn in Thames Water's side, then we can start to force those companies into doing their job properly. But I think we just have to recognise that we cannot trust our own government to fix it. We have to lay it on to them. And the sort of all of that local work that you're talking about there, Simon, is vital in that. I think just keeping people with the idea they don't have to take this crap, but they should not be then told to go away or go and collect some more data. Well, way good, pat you on the head, thanks very much, go and do it again. Here's some money, go and do it again. People have got to get niggly and cross and start to have a plan to do something when they get ignored.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's any help.
Yeah, cool, thanks. I mean, it's part of what we're doing, and trying to get people to think about the plan for what they're doing with their data is a key one. So some groups will collect data because they love it and they're interested in it, but a lot of groups, they want some impact from that data. They want to know where to go and how to collect that data, the data that kind of matters. So there's so many gaps in our monitoring network now that the EA used to do, and it was never enough, but now it's hopeful for this kind of thing. There is an element that people need to kind of get that evidence that they can wave under the nose of local councillors and MPs and stuff. So thanks for that.
Bacteria, I think bacteria is good because this is what we recommended to River Action when they were starting up. Just to do, go for bacteria because it's got legs because it's public health and it's part of bathing quality law. So you can do something. You can use it as a lever, and you can use phosphate and nitrate as a lever. But it's I think the bacteria one as an added thing is just more expensive, more difficult. But if you
Well,
start doing
sometimes,
that,
what I tell people as well is those visual clues, the photographs, the time and
yeah,
date and locations stamped photographs are also really important. And as you show in the Windrush, they're really visible, obvious issues and we sometimes see that all over the place, obviously.
they're great. That's what I often say to people: don't worry about the numbers. Get the pictures and try and set them off against pictures you've got from back in the day, not even that long ago, and
Yeah.
show that difference. Because those are those two images that we've used on the banner of 2009, 2017 plus. They're the ones that you don't have to say anything. Just hold them up. People know that's it. A picture paints 1,000 words. All that. They are really powerful. If anyone's got any pictures in their loft somewhere, go and get them out. They are gold.
Fab. Thank you both so much. Next question. Jeff's been waiting patiently. Jeff Roberts, you're up next.
Hi, Ash. And
Hey,
hi,
Jeff.
Simon, by the way. First of all, let me say that I've been working on river pollution for 50 years. About half of that actually working for Yorkshire Water, and the other half of it as a trustee of the Air Rivers Trust. And whilst I accept the fundamental premises that you're pushing, Ash, can I gently just challenge one or two? Because I think it's important to broaden the conversation out.
Don't be gentle, Jeff. We're not gentle.
Well,
Don't just hit me with it.
Well, you see, that's part of it, you see, because I think that being gentle is more likely to be successful than calling people liars, parasites, corrupt, colluding, dumping sewage, or pumping sewage. If I was on the receiving end of language like that, and you've used every one of those words in your presentation, I probably wouldn't really want to listen to you.
Fine.
The other thing is privatisation. Yeah, I understand privatisation has been criticised, and frankly, I criticised it at the time. But actually, the situation in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland is no better than it is here, and they have a fundamentally different system. There's evidence that the situation in Europe, where some of them are still run by local authorities, is at least as bad as it is here. We in the UK have typically had a much more active environmental lobby than many places in the EU. And I think when you go back to the UK being labelled as the dirty man of Europe, there's an argument that that was as a result of the environmental lobby rather than data. And I'm a great believer in data. And I think the last thing I'd like to mention is this current quality. Yes, there are some horror examples. You've got one or two. The River Wyre is a dire example. And yet the River Aire, I'll put my pension on the line for saying the River Aire is genuinely better than it has been since the Industrial Revolution. We have salmon reappearing, not just in the River Aire, but in many of the pre-industrial rivers in West and South Yorkshire. Now, that wouldn't happen if those rivers were in such a dire state and were deteriorating. So I'm a little concerned that we generalise. I don't know, just a few challenges, actually, I'd invite you to respond to.
Yeah, okay, there's quite a lot there. So I'll try and remember where we started off. Okay, the language, we use it advisedly. I can back up everything I say, and I'll draw you to the fact that you've been kind of involved in environmental issues or improvements for the last 50 years, because look at where we've become. Look at what we've got to. We've got to break the mold, and that means some brutal language. There's been a lot of working together. There's been a lot of collaboration, and that suits very much the polluter. They've been controlling that narrative. They've been funding groups They've been directing them to react in a certain way. They've been using that money for greenwashing. So we're breaking out of that. And it is unpalatable to some people, but frankly, what's been going on before hasn't worked. And the reality is, what I've said is true. When we it will put some people off. However, I mean, on the balance, it's getting the rightful attention. Privatisation. It's worse in Scotland. Okay, there is no real comparison of the state of the water industry in Scotland as a public entity, except we know that bills have been kept lower. We know that the chief executive gets paid about £300,000 a year. We know the chief executive, Severn Trent, gets paid over £3 million a year. We know that money is not sucked out of Scottish Water by shareholders for no reason whatsoever. So the money that goes from the bill payer goes direct to the company. Whether Scottish Water has been sufficiently and efficiently regulated and forced to do its job, I don't know. I think it probably hasn't. I think it could probably do better than it has been. But we do know that the money that goes into it does not get wasted, and that's what happens with privatisation. Welsh Water is meant to be. It's not a public body. It's meant to be a not-for-profit. It's a form of a cooperative, but it's what has been described to be as an expert as a kind of captured cooperative where it's far from not-for-profit. Money is coming out in different ways from that organisation, and Welsh Water is not a good example of a well-performing company as we've seen. Peter Hammond did some work on it, and the chief executive of Welsh Water blatantly admitted to deliberately deciding to continue breaking the law. And they keep a lot of money in that organisation rather than spending it on fixing the assets. So Welsh Water, not a good example. But I come back to the likes of Thames Water, absolutely exploited by Macquarie Bank, left with a massive pile of debt. The government's now frightened to try to take on the water industry and bring it back under control because it's created a debt mountain that it didn't actually need to make. It took money out, took that money away as dividends, and now holds the country to ransom over the debt that it's got. Not something that we should be afraid of, because we're already paying for that debt right now. The only fear that government really has is of having that debt on its own books, because it needs to keep the ratio of debt and GDP falling, so that whatever government that comes in, if it's Labour, wants to stick to the same self-imposed rules of meaningless, rather, financial rules that the last government set for itself. Because sometimes you have to have debt to do something, and to end, at least to end this financial scam would be an advantage. Now, okay, so that's all bad stuff. But what we're saying, and what we do say often, is that the people that work for the water industry, that certainly the people that we know, and we say often that we're doing this exactly the same stuff for you as the same as we're doing it for everyone else, and they agree with this. That we want all the money that comes out of bill payers to go to them, because we know that they want to do far better. They are all frustrated by underfunding, and we're on the same page. And we don't have and they know we use this language, and we don't use it against them. This is not directed at water company staff. In fact, not at all. And we know, of course, water company staff will be breaking the law because they're kind of forced into doing it. They've got no choice but to do it at some other places they're working. And some of them will be incentivized to do things through bonuses as well. But that is not down to them. So we stick with that. There's no other way. I can't think of another way to describe. I'm always torn between calling the shareholders financial parasites or financial predators. I don't know which one would you prefer.
I'll go with
predator. Yeah.
Actually,
So there you go.
I'm interested in what you think a viable financial model might be. You've got into the financial model.
Yeah.
You go back. One of the reasons for privatisation was that the government at the time either wouldn't or couldn't find the capital that was necessary to meet increasing EU regulation. Now, we are where we are now, and we can talk all we like about the past and how this debt mountain's built up, but actually we are where we are. So what is a viable model for the future? Because I find it hard to believe that any government will nationalise these or deprivatise them or whatever in such a way that they would have to fund the tens of billions that are necessary over the next few years.
Okay, well, right. So privatisation was preceded by about 10 years of strangling the water authorities at the time. That was just Margaret Thatcher refusing to let those companies borrow money. So it wasn't that there wasn't money around, they weren't allowed to invest, and they wouldn't give them the money. And that was a softening up, as much as you're seeing with the health service, to allow privatisation to come in. And when that came in, that stranglehold was released, and some money came into the business from bill payers largely, and that caused a blip and an improvement. An improvement happened, and everyone thought, oh, this is good. But then came the financial predators or parasites, one of the two. So when we worry about who is going to bring the money in, the only people that have ever brought the money in, and the only people that will ever bring the money in, will be the bill payer. So there is no fear to be had about where will the money come from. The money will come from where it's always come from, and the only place it can come from, it will come from the bill payer. It won't come from the taxpayer. The bill payer and the taxpayer, when you're talking about water, let's be honest, we're talking about water. Anyone fancy giving it up and saying, oh, well, I'm not going to use water then? Fine, you can step outside that other room and you're not involved in this. In other words, everybody's paying for this, and they are the only people that will pay. Let's just shake that illusion away that there will be money coming in from private equity that will then take a fair return on the money that's brought in. It has never happened, and it won't happen. So why this is the only reason that governments won't or are frightened of public ownership, and there are different models of mutualization, whatever, that don't have to be as brutal as nationalization. Is a tainted word, and we don't think it's a good word because it meant giving it to the government. The government runs it off, but the government never did run it off taxpayers. It ran it off water rates, same sort of bills as you've got now. So there was never any need for it, and there is still no need for it. And what there is a need for is to get rid of the people that steal effectively from it, because you won't like that word steal, but it's not a legitimate extraction of bill payers' money to groups like the government of China, the Abu Dhabi Sovereign Fund. You see that people are attracted to this because we are so stupid as to give them money for nothing. So an end to that is inevitable. You just need a government that's not frightened by water company lobbying, and they've been battered by it over certainly Labour have been absolutely battered by water companies who want to hang on to that golden goose. And the truth is just something, once it's really clearly explained to people what's been going on, I think they will get it, because I couldn't believe it when I first saw it, but that's how it is. Now, look at the work of David Hall, Dieter Helm, and Carol Yearwood, many more. They all come to the same conclusions. This is a massive scam, and we don't have to be in it.
Dieter predicted it before privatisation.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Right, I'm going to butt in there just because I'm very aware of our time. Thank you so much, Jeff, for participating for your questions. We have a question from Charlotte, which I'm going to read out very, very quickly, if we can keep it short and sweet. She says, interpretation of the Environment Agency's results is tricky. Do you think that there will be any moves to standardise how groups process and analyse the data?
Do I think there will be any standardisation? I have no idea, Charlotte. I think the Environment Agency is very reluctant to lose control of its data. That's why it doesn't like to allow other forms of input. I don't know. I mean, in some ways, I think they're attracted to the idea because they can then use it to keep people quiet for a while, but that doesn't seem to be working terribly well. There's a lot of reputation at stake in that. I really don't know. I'm guessing, so don't like to do guessing.
Fab. Claire, I will answer that question in a minute. She says, are there any documents or websites or books, etc., that we can refer to about this in the future? There's a that was a very good explanation in terms of debt. Thank you. Okay, now I'm going to wrap it up there and say thank you so much, Ash, for joining us and being our first guest on our webinar. It's been great to hear you. You've been so inspiring. And yeah, what we're going to do is share this video with everyone. We'll make it available online, so for anyone who couldn't make it can watch it again. And we're also going to put up the links for the toolkit that you mentioned earlier, Ash, in terms of being able to access that information and help communities protect their rivers. And we'll try and get that available up on our wiki site in the next week or so. Now, if you want to be sent a link for that wiki, then what we can do is if you can just email Jen. She's popped her email in the top of this chat, I believe. So email Jen. She can then send you the links for the wiki site, the toolkit, and for the video. Follow us on social media. We're on Instagram and on Facebook. I think we're going to try and get this video onto our very own YouTube channel as well. So find us, and then you'll be able to keep an eye on any upcoming webinars. We might have a podcast coming up too, but don't tell anyone. But yeah, thank you again so much. And one final question from me for Ash is, Ash, what is your most influential and favourite book that you could recommend?
So, right, luckily you already gave me an idea. I might have to think of this. So there are a number, but I'm just going to say Touching the Void by Joe Simpson. And he's a mountaineer who got injured. He broke his leg in the Andes, and he was left for dead. His partner had to cut him free, and he fell down a ravine and so forth. And he got back. He dragged himself back, and it's a fantastic story of just approaching adversity by just taking it. He didn't think about how far he had to go. He just thought about the next step, just one step at a time. And I thought, you know, that's always good to dig in with sometimes. So that one, Touching the Void.
Again, thank you so much, Ash, for joining us. We're very grateful.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thanks for listening. Go and do something great.
Yes, do.
Okay. Cheers.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.